So remember I mentioned how I'm going to show you how to programmatically apply very cool ignore regions and floating regions and so on to different kinds of elements through code? Well, let me show you why that is so important. So far, a bunch of the demos that you've seen in relation to the Ultimate QA homepage have actually been in layout mode. The reason I was doing it in layout mode is because if I do it in strict mode, you can see the amount of differences that come up. Well, to be fair, I actually have made some recent updates to the page. Let's put them on top of one another and see if you can tell what the updates were. So if I zoom in here, don't need to be so close. If I zoom in, let's see if you can tell what the updates were without having the diffs. So here's the baseline versus the checkpoint. So you can see that I've obviously made the header smaller. And the reason why I made the header smaller is you've already seen the bugs that I have where the text on the right-hand side begins to run into the text on the left-hand side. Also, I found that in some places the header actually overlaps on top of some text on my different pages. So it was kind of annoying. So in the meantime, I've made it smaller. So as a result, everything has shifted down. And so, of course, that shows all of these differences, which may be okay depending on your use case. But in my use case, all of these differences, to be honest, are irrelevant because my page is responsive and I don't mind if content shifts down. What I care about is when stuff in here changes or stuff in here changes, or as you've seen, I've had issues with problems over here, right? On different resolutions, stuff starts to kind of merge on top of each other, and those are my problem areas. This is my problem area, my header is my problem area. I'll get these things here are not my problem areas because they're dynamic. My content always changes every single day or every couple days. There is new content. And so as a result, this changes and it shifts up and shifts down. So strict mode does not need to be applied here or here or here or here or here. Strict mode really needs to be applied at certain places. And that's where automated regions come into play. The other cool thing I want to other cool thing that I want to show you is over here. Take a look at what's going on with this social sharing toolbar. So what you can see is I've actually recently had 20 email shares appear here. Whoop whoop. I'm killing the social sharing game, right? No, I'm joking. But it's kind of cool that I'm getting more social shares, which is fantastic. So if you want to help out and change all of these to have more social shares, go ahead and share the page. I wouldn't complain. And then I'll have to deal with that problem in my visual validation tests. But so that has changed, right? And so you can see that the toolbar has changed in size. And not only that, but it's going to continue to change in size as these gain more shares. And also even here, you can see that, right, regularly I'm getting more shares. And so when the baseline happened now, this number has changed. And so if I do the diff, of course, the differences are spotted out. So in this case, what do we want to do, right? The question is, do we care about the changes here? And the answer is no, I don't. I actually want to ignore this area and add an ignore region to here so that it doesn't matter how this changes. And I want to apply strict regions to my header and my footer because I really care what happens there because I've seen bugs there. And so really what I'm doing over time is I'm identifying the page, I'm identifying the changes, and I'm identifying what is important to my page and which kinds of regions should I apply to different areas of the page. And so knowing what I'm learning along the way, I can now programmatically make that happen. Let's go take a look at that. So what I've previously have been doing in all of my test methods, and I've been doing stitch entire page then check. And so previously you've seen that I was doing all of these methods, and then I was doing an eyes.check, and then I was saying target.window.fully so that it checks the entire page. However, a question you might encounter is, what do I do when I need to do multiple things on a check, right? You can't, if you do 2 different checks, that's going to be 2 different checkpoints. So what we need is the capability to do one giant checkpoint. And that's exactly what you see right here now is I'm doing an eyes.check, and I'm supplying the name of the test case. And then I'm using their Fluent interface to create an endless string of commands. So for example, the very first thing I'm doing is I'm saying check the entire page. Then I'm doing .floating. .floating allows me to specify a floating region. And what I did was I actually identified the social sharing toolbar, which if we peek at this definition, you can see that here is my social sharing toolbar. It's a super long class name, but it works. It's right there. So I've identified the social sharing toolbar. And then after that, what's important is actually to set a offset, a downs, and to set a rectangle around the floating region. I'll show you why that's important, but what this rectangle does is it allows this element to float inside of this rectangle. I'll show you how that looks once the test is executed. Next, not only did I need to apply a floating region, I needed to apply a layout region to our social sharing toolbar. The reason why I needed to apply a layout region is because the social sharing toolbar is going to change. So if it is set to a strict region, even if this is set to a floating region, but we get this behavior right here, then it will still be pointed out by Applitools because it's still in a strict region. And so what I need to say is really all I care about is the layout, that, you know, there's these buttons here, these elements in this specific arrangement and not anymore, and then point out the differences. I don't care that this expands or doesn't expand. And so that's why I applied a layout region and a floating region for this one element. And then finally, I applied a strict region to the header location because of that bug that we've had where the text was being concatenated and slopped, you know, on top of each other. And so that was the problem. And we can continue to add more regions here in this manner. You know, if we want an ignore region, we can apply an ignore region. We can apply content regions. We can apply a layout region. We can do stricts. We can set timeouts. And so all of this is simply part of this method's check settings parameter that can be continually expanded. So that's really cool, right? And so when you run this, something very cool happens. And I'm going to show you that next. Here it is, the beautiful masterpiece of programmatic regions applied to the page. So what you can see is it looks exactly as I've showed you before, but you've got this strict region here. You've got a strict region here, right? When I hover over it, you can see it's applied to the entire toolbar. That was a simple element identification. Then what I did was I applied a floating region. Here is the floating region. You see this box? That is the big box. And look, let's scroll down to see where this floating region goes. It goes all the way to the bottom of the page and even further, which is fine, no big deal. But what I'm saying is this toolbar is allowed to float in any area here, and that's okay. Don't identify it as a problem. Well, how did I find this size of this floating region, you might be asking? Well, let me show you. So we've got the Ultimate QA homepage here, right? And we've got this element. So I wanted it to be able to scroll in the entire page. You see why I wanted it to be able to scroll in the entire page is because a screenshot might be captured here and then this element might be visible here. This is why I wanted to be able to scroll the entire page. Okay, and so what I did was I actually opened up the page source and I found the page container. I guess you can apply it at the body level as well. I found it to be found the biggest element that I could, and actually hovering over it, you can already see its dimensions, right? I can't move off, but right above the console, you can see the dimensions, right? 1902 by 3964. So you can see it right there. But if you wanted to do it in another way, you can actually select that element, open up the console, and then you can do, as I did right here, you can do $0, which means work with the currently selected element, and then you can do scroll height. And then if you hit enter, it will tell you the value. And so you can use that value. The other thing you need to do, right, so that figures out the height. How about the other values? Oh, and so for the other numbers, you can see max left and max right offset. This one, how far can it go to the left and how far can it go to the right? That was just a simple, guessing. I just supplied it can't go to the left anymore, and I just said 17 pixels is reasonable for it to go to the right and 0 pixels for it to go to the left. So that's how I set up those values. And this one I actually might have applied at a higher level than I showed you in the console. I might have applied it at the HTML body, but maybe it's worth bringing it down. But either way, it's okay. Just wanted to show you how I get those values. And so we got that floating region. And then you can see that not only that, but we have a layout region that is applied to this element. And so the layout region, again, as I told you, is all of this can be in layout mode. And then this actually, let's do it in strict mode to show you what happens, that even though this element has changed compared to its baseline, it will not be affected because we've obviously applied a layout region to it. And so it can have any numbers inserted in there as it wants. And also it can shift around. So watch this. See that? And if I highlight the differences are not highlighted here. Watch. See that? The differences are highlighted everywhere except here because we've applied the appropriate regions, saying, hey, it's okay for this element to float and be inside of a layout region. So how awesome is that, right? Programmatically, we were able to make this happen. And now from this point forward, actually what I can do is I'm going to keep it in layout mode because, again, as I said, the rest of the stuff I don't care. I care about this one being strict mode. And because I changed the size of the toolbar, I need to set a brand new baseline. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to this, and I'm going to give this a thumbs up. And so now from this point forward, this will be my new baseline that will be used against checking all of my future iterations of the homepage in 1080p resolution.